What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Virtual. We are here. It is myself, Zain, with Ronnie and John. We got a news episode for you, and we talk VR. I mean, this is a VR related podcast, but there was some pretty big news from Sony yesterday regarding, I guess, kind of the future of gaming in a sense, right? With the PS5 announcement. So we want to talk about that and how that could lead into what PSVR looks like in the next generation, since PSVR has been such a big part of the VR community, and it's something that, to be completely honest, we've had limited exposure to here. Although with PS5 coming out, with VR being such a growing industry, we want to talk about that. So I apologize. That was a very long-winded introduction. Ronnie, John, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Same. Doing good, man.
Cool. Well, I'd say we just jump right into it. I don't know, Ronnie. I mean, you and John were kind of blowing up the little group chat we had earlier. So, if you want to give maybe some of your thoughts on what some of the big takeaways were, because there's still a lot of information missing, but what some of the big takeaways were, and then maybe we can dive into how that affects VR.
Sure. So yeah, yesterday was the big kind of reveal event. Before this, Sony had released pictures of the controller, which is called the DualSense controller, which I guess, I mean, as far as we know, the main reason for that is just it has more advanced haptic feedback. I think more similar actually to what is in a lot of the VR controllers. Mm-hmm. So it's able to do, more like granule types of feedback and stuff like that. So that's cool. And then it also has like I think the triggers on the controller can adjust resistance, so they can be like kind of like quick response triggers versus, I'm not like a pro gamer or anything like that, so I don't know all the terminologies on the different types of trigger, but my understanding is they can kind of switch tension on the trigger, so that stuff's cool. Anyways, that's what we kind of officially knew about it before yesterday. And then yesterday's, press conference, or it was like a video release because of COVID and everything. Yesterday's reveal showed off a bunch of games, and then they showed the actual system, which you can see in that picture there. So that was kind of the general take, and everyone kind of was hoping that they were going to double down on showing a bunch of gameplay, because Microsoft had gotten a bunch of crap for mainly only showing like pre-rendered video and that sort of thing when they released the Xbox Series X announcement. So I'm sure Microsoft at this point is like now when is they're going to have to show off some more stuff. And one other thing that is important to note, Sony did before this have a chance to show off Unreal Engine 5 tech running on the PlayStation 5 hardware, which that was also a big announcement. And so that was kind of more of a tech demo. So they did that on a different day. And I think it was Epic actually showing that on PlayStation 5 hardware rather than Sony. But so that stuff was like a whole nother, and we'll get into some of that, because I think some of what Epic has said about their Unreal Engine 5 support on the PlayStation 5 kind of alludes to some of this technology coming to VR. He mentioned specifically Unreal Engine 5 being something that would work well in VR. But yeah, so yesterday it was all about the games and showing off the console. Some people were hoping that they might show PlayStation VR, the next gen version of it. I didn't think that they were going to, just because they hadn't even shown the console yet. And really, I mean, and if you want to, I mean, I guess we can pull up the article in a little bit, but CNET did a really good kind of breakdown on some of the reasons why we probably didn't see PlayStation VR in yesterday's show. I mean, something to remember is the original PlayStation VR didn't release until 3 years after the PlayStation 4 released. So I mean, I think it was, people are excited about a new PlayStation VR headset, obviously, but I think that a new headset will probably take a little bit of time for them to get out, especially if they're going to do some really cool stuff with it, which hopefully they will. But yeah, just focusing on yesterday's show, The games were really awesome, and actually, I thought they did a great job of showing what the new hardware is really going to be about. It should be noted that the video stream was only 30 frames per second, and the games hopefully will be running faster than that potentially. So we don't. So the footage we have right now is not completely, it doesn't showcase exactly how the PlayStation 5 itself will run. It hopefully will run even better than what we were saying. But some of the things that stood out to me were just in terms of it seemed like there was a lot going on screen, like a lot of enemies, a lot of projectiles, a lot of particle effects, and things seemed to be running pretty well. And that was probably the biggest. I mean, fidelity obviously is up and things look better generally speaking, but it seemed like there was just a lot more going on in each of the games that I saw when compared to the current generation. And that just probably goes to show, I think one of the biggest things that the new consoles are going to have over the old ones is increased CPU power. Mm-hmm. They're obviously going to be more powerful in the graphics department too, but current generation consoles, I should say, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, both of those used, they're called it's the AMD Jaguar CPU, Jaguar cores, and they're more like mobile. It's more like a mobile CPU, whereas the new consoles are more like a full on desktop CPU, and so they're just more capable in general. They're equivalent to third gen Ryzen chips on the PC side of things. So, just for people out there that don't know all the tech specs, just know that the CPU backing the next gen hardware is substantially more powerful than what was there before. And so I think that's going to allow for just like more complicated types of games being played and also higher frame rates. Mm-hmm. So those are all cool things. And then last thing, and then I want to see John's thoughts. And I'm not getting into any specific games. I thought so many of the games they showed were all really, really cool. And for different reasons, showed off a lot of different kinds of gameplay types and a lot of different styles and all that sort of thing. So it got me really excited about games in general, because I mean, these games will be coming out to, they'll be on the PC, they'll be on the Xbox, but this is just kind of a glimpse, like you were saying, Zain, of what future, flat, normal PC style games will look like. And they look really awesome. And the only thing that they kind of showed relating to VR is that they did show what they labeled as like a new HD camera for the PlayStation 5.
Yep, I was reading about that.
Yeah, and so I mean, I was thinking about it. I mean, streaming's obviously big, so it could be for that. But a lot of people are also saying, well, this is a way to make the PlayStation 5 for sure compatible with PlayStation, original PlayStation VR titles. Because obviously PlayStation VR currently needs a camera to track the headset. Like all of the current PlayStation VR stuff is all based on that camera seeing the controllers and your headset. And so, I mean, even if the next gen headset ends up having inside out tracking and doesn't really require a camera per se, having the camera support there is important, because at least for a while, the only way you're probably going to be playing VR games on your PlayStation 5 is going to be the legacy, original PlayStation VR titles. So anyways, those are my main takeaways. And we can talk about SSD speeds and all that, because that's another thing that they've been touting on the PlayStation 5 in particular, is that it can load games so fast that there's no load times, and you can just you can and one of the best demos that they showed for that was Ratchet and Clank, because it was in that game, you were going from dimension to dimension, and the way they showed that, it was live gameplay, and essentially they would be in one area of the game, and a portal would open, and they would drop into the portal, and they're in a completely different, crazy, chaotic environment, fall into another portal, another completely different, crazy environment, switching back and forth dimension to dimension, and no loading, because apparently the connection between the hard drive and and the memory on the console is so fast that it can just constantly be streaming stuff in without having to. So anyways, so that's some good stuff. But yeah, John,
I mean, John, you had some good stuff in the chat too. So I wanted to get your thoughts just more on like the tech side of things, or the tech spec side of things too.
Yeah. So I guess like, so it all looks good. I actually sold my PlayStation 4 not too long ago because I did buy a PC and I wanted to get an Oculus. So that was probably right around a year ago. And the only game that I really hated doing that for was Spider-Man. And thankfully they brought it to PS Now, so I can play that on my PC now, which is awesome. But I'm probably gonna end up picking up a PlayStation 5 if my wife will let me. So it's yeah. So I'll probably end up picking one
for
up.
the new Spider-Man, right?
100%. I have to do that, and I've been doing some research on that too. That to me, that's like the biggest drop game wise, just because I'm such a I have a Spider-Man tattoo on my leg. I love Spider-Man.
Dude, in the original game, I don't have a tattoo or anything, but I love Spider-Man too, and. The original game was like,
oh my god,
it was such an homage to Spider-Man in every way. Like their portrayal of Peter Parker in that, and like the whole, like everything about it was just so genuine. And like, I mean, it was like as genuine a Spider-Man experience as you can get like in any medium. Like,
yep, totally agree. And like my tattoo is actually like Peter Parker and Miles Morales on either side. So. I'm really excited that they're doing this, and it's interesting. I take a quick rabbit trail, but like they're teeing this up like that Uncharted spinoff. It's going to be kind of this in that same vein. So it's not the actual sequel to the game. It's more than DLC. Yeah, because it's a new game.
It's like a side story, but like
yeah.
It's like a side campaign almost. Like
exactly, and that's really cool. But the one thing that I did want to make note of, or that I found interesting, was I guess they're releasing two different versions of the hardware. One will have a disk drive, the other one will not. Yeah. And the only thing that gives me pause about the one that doesn't is, well, like how much solid state storage is there going to be, and then can you expand it with like your own external solid state drives?
I'll answer part of that because I think they have released the exact amount of the hard drive, and I think it's like I want to say it's 825 gigs. It's like a weird number. It's like it's not quite 1 terabyte. It's like 800 something gigabytes. So that's that answer. And I think as far as upgrading it, I think there will be an option to upgrade it, but it's not going to be easy. Like with the Xbox Series X, there's an actual like proprietary SSD that Microsoft's going to be releasing, and like you like literally, it's almost like a memory card slot. Like you pull it from the back of the drive and stick the new one in. Whereas Sony is taking a different approach. Sony it's much more probably like the PlayStation 4 was, where you kind of have to open up the system a little bit to get to the hard drive. And they're saying that you could potentially change it, but they're also saying that the way their SSD, so the SSD speed on the PlayStation 5 is way faster than on the Xbox Series X.
Right, that's what I was hearing too.
Yeah, and so they're saying that you would have to, like, whatever the hard drive would be, it would have to pass some kind of a test that the system does on boot up, and that most drives won't pass that test, apparently.
So and that's going to be a thing for the games, I guess, like you were talking about that, like constantly being able to. Okay,
I don't know the exact there's actually a good, there's a video that has already been put out by Mark Cerny, who's the like lead architect or whatever for Sony on the PS5, and he goes into like extreme detail on exactly what they did with the memory system and the SSD of the PS5. But basically, I mean, the way they're talking and the way Epic also kind of elaborated on a little bit during their Unreal Engine 5 talk is that with the PlayStation 5, it sounds like the SSD can be accessed almost directly by the memory of the GPU and the CPU. So like literally stuff is just like being pulled straight into your GPU instead of having to be like processed. Like
I see. Yeah.
and so it's way faster. Like it's like a like and the apparently the Xbox Series X won't be able to do that. So even though the Xbox Series X and PCs today are able to pull from memory, they're able to pull from SSDs really fast just because SSDs are super fast.
Right.
They still read data off of SSDs similar to how they would like a normal hard drive.
Yeah, sure.
But the PlayStation 5 apparently is using that crazy bandwidth to completely use what their access to the storage in a completely different way. So they're literally like feeding off of it almost like memory in a sense. And like and so because of that, like they can't just let you use any hard drive. The hard drive has to be super, super fast to enable that to even work. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like we know how this stuff, like, I mean, games are going to have to work on the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, and PCs. And so, like, if only Sony first party and exclusives are going to really take advantage of that crazy connection for the near future, and then maybe it's not going to be as big of a deal, or maybe what Sony's doing is going to spread to the PC and other and maybe there's ways to get that stuff done architecturally without having to have new hardware. I don't know. But
yeah, sure.
John, I feel like you mentioned something else, John, in the chat about just one of the concerns you had with not.
Yeah, so that without the drive. So that's my answer on the storage space and like the changing of hardware. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be easy to switch out necessarily, but maybe. And then it's not a huge storage space. I mean, for me personally, I mean, I swap like. I would almost bet on you having to install physical media games with this device, just because if that loading time stuff becomes that crazy, like I can't imagine a Blu-ray drive disc being able to feed information fast enough.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So I kind of think that most likely you'll be buying discs and installing the games.
Yeah, and I guess that's all fine. That's all well and good. And here's what I love about like the freedom of a PC is like I have a little SanDisk that's literally like, I mean, less, it's like a quarter the size of any smartphone, and it's 2 terabytes, and I can swap it out. I can have all my games, all my Steam library on there installed and swap it between my different computers, and it just works. And like, I guess what that would be the only thing that gives me pause into like.
It sounds like Microsoft is doing what you wanted, like what you're able to do on your PC now.
Yeah.
Is what Microsoft is going to do. It sounds like they're 100% thinking that way. Like you almost buy cartridges.
Yeah.
And you like install games and you can swap them and no big deal. Yeah. But the downside to that, like in this situation, is then you have to deal with the normal SSD. Yeah, you have to deal with the normal SSD speeds versus these crazy ones that Sony's trying to do. But like, I think it's going to be a wait and see to see like, is all this hype that like when Sony talks a big game about how crazy this load time thing is on their system, like how far off is Microsoft actually going to be from that using normal SSDs? Because like, and if it's comparable, then the convenience of Microsoft's way of doing things might end up winning the day. Like it'll be interesting to see. But
PlayStation does have the exclusives though, and that's the thing. But and then going back to the like just on that exclusive note, like with PSVR, they actually have one of my favorite VR games, Astrobot. Astrobot is a total blast. Like it is such a blast.
Astrobot is like one of those games that like it's the number one game. I think if I could pick like one game that I'd want like brought from PSVR to Oculus, like, that's my number one. Just because I got a chance to play it just a little bit at E3, but I haven't had a chance to play the full game. But when I played like the level I played at E3, I was like, dude, this is amazing. It's like it feels like you're playing. Yeah, it feels like you're playing like almost like a Mario game, like in VR. But like it's really good. Like
it is
super, super good. Yeah, I hope so. The one that they showed at last night's event, that's like, so I read afterwards. So they did show like an Astrobot game at the show.
Oh, cool.
But it was just it's one that's being bundled with the system apparently, and it's just to show off the controller, so it's not VR.
Oh.
But Astrobot, yeah, initially Astrobot had been used for some like PlayStation for like camera stuff too. Like, so it's like a character that PlayStation has used to show off their hardware. So yeah, like, because for a second there I was like, oh, is this gonna be like a VR thing? But I would bet money that we'll be seeing another Astrobot in VR. Like,
oh
yeah. So I'm not worried about that. But
yeah,
like, and we do know that. So, and that comes down to like, we do know that Sony is going to be releasing a new version of the PlayStation VR,
the controllers and all that different stuff.
Yeah. So that's what. So we'll see how all that stuff goes. But what was I was gonna mention one other. Oh, the other concern I had about getting the version of the PlayStation 5 without the disc is also backwards compatibility. And here's the thing, like, we don't know exactly yet how backwards compatible the PlayStation 5 is going to be. Right. Like, Microsoft has been much more upfront on they're trying to get like everything Xbox ever to run on their new stuff, whereas Sony is they're taking the approach more like, it's interesting because Xbox is very much saying like, oh, they're kind of almost acting like we're not going to force people to switch over to the new system. Like if you want to, like, there's going to be this period where we're going to be releasing games that work great on both, you know? So if you want the high-end experience, the Xbox Series X is for you. But don't worry, if you have an Xbox One, like, you might be able to play like, you know, a crappier version of the same one, you know?
Yeah.
And so they're taking that approach where like they're going to have multiple tiers of hardware and this will work on everything. Where Sony has very much been like PlayStation 5 all the way. Like, there's going to be a hard cutoff, and we're not guaranteeing that our old games are going to work on our new system. But trust me, the new stuff is so good that you're not going to care. You know,
and I kind of appreciate that mentality. I like a little bit more, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know.
If it serves to future-proof, you know, where they're going with the tech, then it makes sense, right? And especially just it's an 8-year product life cycle if you think about it. Like, PS4 came out in 2012, and granted, you can say
really.
Yeah, it's a
what?
So I believe that's
oh man,
I couldn't believe I
could be right. That sounds about right.
I swear I read it last night. I mean, we can look it up now to fact check ourselves.
That sounds about
it's around that time, right? And then PSVR was almost like the PS4 and a half that came out in between. So kind of taking it back to where we think PSVR will go from here. You know, is this something that will take will it take VR or their next iteration of PSVR 2 to 3 years as they treat it as like a half life cycle, or is there enough hype around it, you know what I mean, like, that they want to introduce this as quickly as possible? And my fear is that it is the latter, right? Like, right now there was no mention of PSVR last night because it's been so long since PlayStation or PS4 came out that it's one of those things where you just don't, you know, they're not going to be pushing it until there's I just feel like they're not going to be pushing it until the hype kind of dies down for this. And right now hype is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
So I don't know, have either of you owned a PSVR before?
I haven't.
Okay.
No, we haven't.
That was my first like legit headset, I guess, if you want to call it that. And I would still say it's like a half legit headset. It's like kind of there. And that's why, like, I got rid of it initially, even before I sold my PlayStation. Like, I got rid of my PSVR, and the main reason is just because the controllers, like those Move controllers, came out. I think I'm correct on this. They came out on like PlayStation 3.
They did.
So
they did.
Yeah. So like they are just not there, and then the tracking with the camera is like, it's like passable. But I really think that them holding out, I think the Unreal stuff is definitely cause for them to hold back, like that CNET article was talking about, just because everything with that is absolutely ridiculous. And if it utilizes the PlayStation 5 hardware as well as they're saying it does, then applying that to whatever their next gen headset is going to be is great. And as we're seeing more and more competitors for the Quest and things like that with inside out tracking, like I definitely see them going that route, fixing that tracking issue, having better controllers that are probably more akin to like the Index or like Rift-esque controllers or Quest controllers, what have you. Even, I mean, because it seems like everyone's kind of taking that approach. Even like the Vive Cosmos is, those controllers are similar. So I think it stands to reason that they would go that route, and also like porting over different games, like even Vader Immortal, I'm pretty sure is coming to PSVR. If I'm,
It is.
Yeah.
Which,
so like,
which that gives me excitement on a
Yeah.
possible crossover for the opposite way, because
Yeah.
I heard that, like, I mean, before all this stuff happened,
Paper
like,
Beast.
Paper Beast is
Yeah.
Paper Beast. That was actually on my list of news items before PlayStation 5 hit. It's a PlayStation VR title that's coming to Oculus.
Yep.
And because I think there was some talk, like Jason Rubin, who's a big guy at Oculus, was saying stuff like, we would totally love it we would totally be in for bringing Oculus exclusive content to Sony if Sony brought some of their content to us.
Yeah.
And then that would, and so, I mean, when I saw the Vader Immortal announcement, I was kind of like, I wonder, that could just be a timed exclusivity thing, or it could be like, I don't know how deep Oculus had its tentacles in that game or not.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I would absolutely like be all in for some kind of a partnership like that, where we got some of the PlayStation stuff on the PC side and they got the Oculus, because it makes sense. At the end of the day, it's super expensive to make VR games, and so the more people playing stuff, the better. That would be awesome. But
Yep.
Well, this has been our call against exclusivity for a while, right? With
of course,
with small and small but quickly growing industry. But John, I just want to take it back for a quick moment, because I feel like you mentioned how you bought the PSVR and it was a passable experience, but I feel like what I want to highlight from that, though, is the fact that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my assumption is that playing it on PSVR kind of ignited that interest in VR in general for you, right? So having something that was quickly and easily accessible made you realize some of the capability of it, and then obviously got you excited for higher gear headsets like the Quest or whatever, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
to me there's still a value and importance for PSVR, and if there's not going to be a PSVR update for a while, or a new console for a while, I think that it's great that they are making things backwards compatible, just because we need that in order to help the industry grow.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And like my experience was, I had a Samsung phone, so I got the little Gear VR thing, and that like totally I was in at that point. I was sold. And then I tried like the original Vive at a Microsoft store once, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, now I have hands. Like, what the heck? And I can walk around inside, whatever the parameters are. I was like, this is crazy. And then I was like, oh man, well, like, what do I need to get into this? And then I found out you had to have a PC, and then you actually have to buy the headset, which at that point it was still like $600 or whatever. And I had no cash to throw at that. So, but I did, like, eventually down the line get a PS4. And if you have a PS4, then all you need is, to buy the headset. And I found one secondhand for like $180, and I was like, okay, well, like that's like fine. I can do that. So, and that definitely, like, that quenched the thirst for a little bit, especially Astrobot. Astrobot was one of those that's like, that was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed. And there were a couple others, like I played Batman Arkham on that, which was pretty decent. And I played Skyrim on it, which was total garbage in my opinion.
I mean, I don't love it on the PC either, just because it's like, I mean, I hear you can do things with it mod wise, but I'm not super into Skyrim to the point where I know, like, all the mods to get and all of that, and I even had like a diehard friend of mine that loves Skyrim. Like he's a Bethesda hardcore fan, and he actually like he had a Rift, but he never got touch controllers because the Rift initially didn't come with them.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't using it very much because he never had controllers. So I gave him my controllers and was like, hey, you have to get into VR. So he started playing other games and was totally like, he fell in love with VR. He's like, this is amazing. Getting these touch controllers really blew it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to try Skyrim. And he tried Skyrim. It made him super sick. And I feel like that was like a spiral away from, like, for him, that wasn't a good thing for him to try.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there are better games that are in that like sphere, like Asgard's Wrath or like whatever. It's just stuff like that's similar. That's just way like leaps and bounds better. And it's because it's it's because it was designed for VR and Skyrim wasn't. And that's
Did you ever get a chance to try Truth and Blood, or that may have came out after? It's kind of like my understanding is it's almost like a Die Hard like actiony type. Like it's like you feel like you're in an action movie. Kind of game.
I don't think I ever did get to that one.
I have a feeling it came out on PlayStation VR probably after you sold yours, because I think it was kind of a later. That supposedly that's amazing too. Like people talk about it like being like a killer app, like Astrobot, like as in like PlayStation VR, like amazing titles that you wish that were on the PC, like Astrobot, Truth and like those are some of the ones that come up.
Yeah, that's really cool. And all that gets me really excited, as like especially if the CPU that's in the PS5 is going to be more akin to like a PC CPU. That's what they're going to be able to do in terms of VR stuff is going to be leaps and bounds above what it is now, and that's all really, really exciting stuff. I'm with you guys. I think it'll be maybe a couple of years before we actually see something. Maybe a year. Like I don't know, especially if we're already seeing like leaks for patents for controllers and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like all of that, like the announcement was cool. I thought they did a really good job. I don't know if y'all like have figured this out about me yet. I'm really not partial, like company wise, towards any specific thing. Like I don't have brand loyalty really, but just looking at like the specs between the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, like my $400 or $500, whichever system, would definitely be going towards a PlayStation 5 versus an Xbox. And I've owned an Xbox in the past. Like I'm not impartial to it. I just think like for me personally, I'm more of a story driven type guy when it comes to my games versus multiplayer, and PlayStation definitely has the exclusives, and that goes back to that conversation about exclusivity and all of that. But specifically Spider-Man, but also God of War and some other titles like that.
No, I'm with you.
Well, and just to clarify, sorry, Ronnie, but just to clarify on the exclusivity, because I don't want it to make it seem like we're just kind of crapping all over the place on exclusives. To me, the the console industry, the console market is very mature, very established. And so I feel like they can take certain necessary risks. I think when we talk about exclusivity and specifically exclusivity in the VR community, I think a lot of that was in the context of the fact that we were talking, or we are currently talking to a lot of developers and development teams, indie developers, where it's like we get it. We totally understand that you got to get paid. You got to be able to sustain yourself, and it's that balance between being able to do that and make an amazing game versus having something that reaches more people, right? So I think what's and just speaking about Oculus, because that's mainly where we've been talking about the exclusives for within this podcast. I mean, PSVR is starting to become more of a player now with a lot of games, but like you said, it's still kind of a tier below. But with Oculus, it's one of those things where it's a bittersweet type of thing, right? Where we're seeing some fantastic games come out because Oculus is investing and really investing in a lot of these smaller developers. But we just want to make sure that these games have the ability to reach as many people as possible, just for the exposure, right? Like I think to me, it's still crazy that it's about 4 years since the Vive came out. And I can still throw someone in the Vive that was just like, wait, this is here. Wait, VR is a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like,
oh yeah,
it,
100%.
yeah. So it's one of those things where just as a and being this show as a VR podcast, we're really just the rising tide lifts all boats, right? So we just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're pushing for that in every way possible, and of course being understanding and sensitive to the idea that these development teams got to eat, they gotta do what they got to do. So it's
100%.
it's complicated. I don't want it to seem like we are anti-exclusives. To me, it's just one of the things I wanted to clarify on the show, so people who might just be tuning in for this episode think that, oh, we're exclusives bad, So it's one of those things where I just want to make sure we kind of clarify that. So hopefully that does.
And I'm with you too, John. Like as far as like I go with the tide as far as like for me, every single purchase is a new decision to make.
Yeah.
And like coming into this console space, am I going to get a console? Am I going to like last generation was the first time that I didn't buy a PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. Before last generation, I always had every console. And for some reason, last generation, I guess because when those consoles first came out, I had just purchased a really, really nice PC. And yeah, my PC was so good at the time that I felt like the consoles just couldn't compare to what the types of games I was playing. And later on in that, during the generation, started to kind of eat at me a little bit. Like there were certain exclusives that I was like, man, this is the time that I wish I had and PlayStation was the one that kept coming up. So like I would borrow my little brother's PlayStation 4 just to play exclusives like Spider-Man, for example. But that didn't really ever happen with Xbox games because fortunately, a lot of the games that Microsoft had that were exclusive that I really wanted to play, if there was something that was necessary for me to play, I could usually get it from the Microsoft store on the PC or eventually it would come to. So like there wasn't that, and it does seem like Microsoft is kind of almost taking like a platform agnostic approach to some respect.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of like if you're buying their games on the PC, they're cool with it. Like you don't really necessarily have to. And so yeah, for people like us, especially that have PCs for VR, and like, it really seems like now the battle is, are you going to get a console at all? Is that console going to be like a PlayStation console or a Nintendo console? Because Xbox to me, and like, there's such good games on both. Xbox, they're still huge. Like Microsoft's been doing great things in the gaming space too. It's just, their stuff is more accessible on the PC for me. And so that's how I'm accessible. Like at the end of the day, it's all about the content really.
Yeah.
And so that's where like, yeah, if you don't have a PC and you have to choose, then it comes down to like, what type of gamer are you? Like, do you like the more story driven stuff? Seems like Sony does more of the serious story games. Do you just like having fun and playing just fun titles? Like maybe sometimes Nintendo consoles are great at those types of experiences, like not as serious all the time. Though like Zelda games are pretty serious, but they're like more pick up and play, and you can take the Switch on the go. So there's that. And then Microsoft is kind of like they're, to some extent, we'll see how this SSD stuff pans out. But looking at the pure specs, the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X looks considerably more powerful than the PlayStation 5 on paper. So like its GPU and CPU are both clocked higher, but it's weird because Sony's doing this thing where they're focusing, like, I don't know, the way they're using their consoles are different too. Like the way they're using their GPUs.
Yeah.
So I really think we don't know exactly, like straightforward wise, how each one's going. But like, on paper, Xbox might be. So it's really hard to say. But for me, like you, right now, I'm really tempted in getting a PlayStation 5 because, number one, like you said, the exclusives are just great. And they're the types of exclusives that I'm personally very interested in. And then on top of that, they've had a lot of great VR content that's been exclusive. So it's kind of like a no-brainer. Like for me, I care about VR. I have a strong PC. If I'm going to get a console, like Sony is making a lot of really strong arguments for me. Now the question is going to be like, what are new GPUs going to be looking like on the GPU space on the PC side of things? There are a lot of like big, like both AMD, which they're the ones that are behind all the GPUs in both consoles at this the Xbox and PlayStation are going to be using AMD GPUs, and they're going to be bringing that technology to the PC prior to the release of these consoles. So there's that. And then on the flip side, apparently AMD is doing such a good job that they're actually pushing NVIDIA to make a really, really crazy GPU cycle this in the next few months. Like they're going to be releasing really, really, really strong cards. So I mean, I'm now debating whether I'm going to want to upgrade my GPU and my computer and again wait for a console, or am I just going to buy a PlayStation 5 and wait for the GPU upgrade? Like, it's a tough time to. These are all good, good choices to have. It seems like everything looks really, really awesome, and I mean, I guess that's.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be some tough decisions to make.
One thing I did want to mention about the PlayStation just before we wrap things up is this is just purely speculation. I do really think that whatever new headset they're going to release is going to be inside-out tracking.
Yeah, same.
I think the biggest tell for that are the controllers and the fact that like PlayStation, the PlayStation 4 controllers had that huge light bar on the front of the controller for tracking purposes, and that was like outside facing, so it would face like see.
Wow, thank you for the demonstration.
See, and look, show the direction, show where the light is. See, it's on the outside.
Yeah.
So if you had a camera mounted like near your TV, it would be able to see the controllers and track them using that pretty well. Yeah. Well, the new controllers have much smaller light bars, and they're on the front of the controller. So if you had cameras mounted to your head, it would see them really well. But a camera that's mounted outside wouldn't see them as clearly.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's designed to be tracked a little bit easier from like cameras mounted on your head. So, and I'm not saying they won't have other controllers that are tracked as well. I'm just saying that and maybe they don't use that technology at all, and the lights on the new controllers are just for show. But but it looked like something that could be a possibility. So I wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do a wrap up and final thoughts here. Let's make it fun, because I mean we're putting this out there into the world, so we'll be able to come back and see where our predictions are at. John, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
You had to guess, so now we have a little bit of more information on the PSVR or on the PS5. Give me your year that you believe we will get a PSVR 2. And maybe a little explanation why you think.
I mean, all right, to be honest, my prediction would be 2021. And the reason why is we have had a controller leak already. Like, ish. It's not, it's paper. It's not like actual hardware. It's not a photo of actual hardware or anything. But like, that's why. And then, like you said, the last iteration is slowly but surely becoming a dinosaur. So they're going to need to make that upgrade. And with Unreal doing all of their stuff early next year, to me, that just logic stands the reason that they would capitalize on that sometime next year, holiday next year, summer next year, like one of the two. And yeah.
Okay. All right. Ronnie, how about you?
Yeah, I'm not far off. Like I want to say late 2021 would be the most optimistic, but like early 2022. And I'd say, and I mean, I like what John said about, the original PlayStation VR is feeling really dated. And I really don't think, I think they want to, I mean, who knows exactly what they're going to do, but they want to keep the momentum of PlayStation VR going. But at the same time, I don't think there's going to be a ton of people that are going to want to take the old hardware and use it on the PlayStation 5. I just don't see that. So the earlier for them, the better. And so with that, then it just comes down to what are they able to do with it. Like I've seen rumors of them trying to bring some of the eye tracking stuff and all that. I kind of doubt that if they're gonna release it quickly. Like think about the trade-offs they were willing to make with PlayStation VR, and think of like what are similar trade-offs that they could make while bringing something new to the table. I think that what I would focus on if I was Sony on a PlayStation VR 2 would be inside-out tracking and wireless. Like I think those are the two things that I would like from a normal and just making the headset lighter. And so I think that ultimately we could be like further down the road, we could be saying similar stuff to what we're saying about the PlayStation VR now. Like later PC headsets, like PC headsets at the end of the day will probably always be a little bit more advanced, just like the tech in a PC is always more advanced than the consoles. Yeah. But what Sony has to worry about is how can we make our next PlayStation VR headset as consumer friendly as possible. And I think making it sounds like the biggest hassles for people were having to like have the hardware, like set up the cameras and all that, and then having to deal with all the wires and stuff. And so if they can solve those problems, even if it's similar tech to what they have now, like I think it'd be easy for them to make new controllers and a new tracking tech. Like they've probably been working on that for a long time now, because they weren't working on that for even last PlayStation VR. They just adopted their old camera tech. So I bet you we'll see relatively soon a new headset from them, inside out tracking, new controllers, and hopefully I think they're going to have some kind of a wireless solution. And if that means it's a little bit, there's going to be a little bit of latency. It's not perfect. Like Valve and Oculus, like they're always waiting for that perfect solution before they announce. I think Sony would be willing to maybe make something that's not so perfect, but releases soon. And I think people won't care. And I think that'll be really good for them.
Cool. All right. Well, I like the points that you brought up, and I'm just gonna play devil's advocate just because. Just because. I'm gonna go with 2023, mainly because I feel like, and I want you guys to be right as much as possible, but the cynical side of me says that this like VR just isn't as big of a focus. It isn't as big of a cash cow or for them. So right now the focus will be for this holiday period, probably for next holiday period, to really push console sales rather than, asking people to drop $800 to $1,000 for the whole thing. Right. So that's point number one. Point number two, and I'm totally going out on a speculative limb here, but we all look, at least in the VR community, at PSVR, and we marvel at how accessible it is and how how great it's been for the VR community. But even talking with John today, it's kind of just okay when you look at it from a overall VR perspective, right? I'm wondering if from a branding perspective, Sony wants to change the narrative and say, hey, instead of being a just good enough type of VR, like this is the future of gaming. Why don't we hold off on the next generation? People will be enamored with the PS5 for a while. Why don't we hold off and make something like the next Oculus Quest, right? That people just have to have. So and again, I'm just totally speculating. I would say from a branding perspective, I wonder if they want to rebrand. And so that's just my thoughts. John, it looks like you got excited about
that. You just got my gears turning, man. Because like PS Vita is getting kind of dated too. So what if they just completely abandoned Vita and made a standalone headset to compete with Quest? Oh man.
See, I'd almost say though, like, so I agree. Like, I like your thinking, Zain. That's really interesting and I think it makes sense for them to. I mean, if you think about it from their perspective, they do have to sell those consoles in order to sell a PlayStation VR 2. So for them, and all their eggs are really the PlayStation 5, and the PlayStation VR is just dressing on top. So you're right. So I think they double down for a while on making sure PlayStation 5 sales are strong, and maybe and it would be cool if they tried to reposition their VR as being the most high-end VR, and they take their sweet time with the R&D on that. The only thing I'd say is I would point to John's example of the Vita and say that that's evidence of why they wouldn't do a standalone, just because they've had a lot of trouble and a lot of failure when it comes to making like handhelds and like separate devices. So I think that they'll still have their headset connected to the PlayStation 5,
Okay.
but
Sorry,
wireless.
Yeah. So I let me clarify, because when I said the next Oculus Quest, I didn't mean in the sense of a standalone headset, although that is a really cool point. I just meant that the Oculus Quest was such a game changer in terms of
Like a must-have
what
consumer
it
VR.
offered, right? Like
Yeah.
here's the thing, right? Like the Quest is obviously not the most powerful headset out there, but it offered something different, wireless, standalone, right? So like I'm just saying, PlayStation might want to take charge and control the narrative of like, hey, we got the next thing, right? Like it may not be the best, but it's going to be a must-have in your VR arsenal type of thing, similar to what the Quest was. So
and think of how many people would be able to like play games like Half-Life Alyx or something if PC VR titles start going to like a high-end headset on the PlayStation. That'd be amazing.
All right, guys, I apologize. I got to run, but this has been fun. I cannot wait until we get more information on this. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Ronnie, John, hope you guys have a fantastic weekend, and we'll chat more VR soon. All right, take care, guys.
See you guys.